Hello, my name is Garrett. I was a heroin addict for about 7 years. I was born in Greenfield, Indiana, to two parents who split really early. My father was a drug addict. My mother, for a long time, was an alcoholic. She married a man who was a military man, so we decided we were going to move around the world, base to base, and he was a very, very abusive guy for the longest time. My four siblings and I, we suffered from him greatly. He beat my mom, he beat on us, he molested my family, he molested my sister, and that brought forth a lot of pain for us. And one day he deployed, and my mother deployed as well. And so we had to go move in with my father. I was probably about 12 years old at this point in time. And moving in with Dad brought forth some new things. Obviously he was a drug addict, and he became more of a friend than he did a father for a long, long time. And at an early age of probably 13, I was introduced to smoking cigarettes, drinking some alcohol, and smoking a little bit of weed. And at that time, it probably seemed pretty normal for a teenager to do those things, but it pretty quickly, it turned into something else. And you know, by the time I was 14, I'd tried a few pills. I'd maybe done some pain pills and Xanax, things of that nature. I wasn't doing so well in school. I was allowed to have little parties I shouldn't have been having as well with my friends at my house. I had engaged in some sexual activities really young as well. I think I'd lost my virginity at age 13. And from there on out, I think every holiday with my father, every family occasion involved either smoking a joint, doing a line of cocaine, something of that nature. I just kept getting kicked out of school over and over and over again. And religion did not exist at this point in my life as well. My mother wasn't very religious. My father certainly was not either. And when I turned 14, my mother had come back from Afghanistan. She had married a new man. He was a very good man, but I had no interest in going back and leaving behind these newfound things I had, these drugs, these girls, the freedom to do the things I wanted to do. But either way, I had to go. So I went back to my mother's, and we lived in North Carolina for a year. And I went back to my father's for my summer break after that. I always spent all my summers with my dad. And so that was normal. When I went back, I never left. I had done a whole bunch of crazy stuff that summer. I tried a bunch of new drugs. I was just having the time of my life, and I didn't want to go. So I broke my mother's heart. I stayed with my dad. And from there, I kept getting kicked out of school over and over again. By the time I was 16, I'd been expelled from school. I was doing heroin. I was forced to go and work with my dad for a little bit just because I was expelled. And so I drove this man around in Indianapolis in a minivan and did heroin with him all day while we worked. And I had also done it with my father. And come 17, I was back in school again after being expelled. And I had been expelled for school for everything, for fighting. I'd been expelled for doing drugs. I snorted pills on the school bus with the fella, and I got told on like I should have been. Come 18, I had done everything there is to do on the drug list: methamphetamines, hallucinogenics, heroin, cocaine, all the pills. I had engulfed in all that with my family. So this is a family bonding experience. This is all I know in that regard, is to do drugs with my family. Our chores were rewarded with cigarettes, things of that nature. So by 18, my stepmom had said I needed to start paying some rent or move out, and so I moved right on out. I got a job as a diesel mechanic, and this job allowed me to use a service truck, and I used it for everything. I drove around and picked up all my drugs in this truck. They just, without knowing it, they supplied me every means I needed to get high. And eventually, after about 3 years, I had lost that job. I had a son with the woman, and my addiction had ruined that relationship very early on. I found the needle. At this point, I was probably 19. It's the first time I'd ever used a needle. And I never stopped after that. It lasted about 6 more years. I'd found myself incarcerated for the first time, and I was blessed to have been bailed out so quickly. I remember it was winter time. I was laying on the floor in the drunk tank. The heat was out in the center or in the front of the building, and we were next to the door, so it was frigid. It was so cold, and I was withdrawn in there. It was a terrible experience, and you think that would have been enough, but it was not. It never is. And so I did what I thought I had to do, and I took my son and my girlfriend at the time, and we had moved to Michigan with my mother just to try to get away and have a new fresh start. And about 6 months into that, I'd gotten a job in a dry ice factory. And I remember it was the end of my shift, and I was pretty sober at this time. I think I was having some drinks, and that was about it, but I hadn't used substances for near 8 months. 8 months was how long I'd abstained from that. And I got my glove stuck into this machine at work, and it had completely tore my arm apart. I remember I separated all the tendons, the ligaments. I went all the way down to the bone. And at that same time, I had decided I didn't want to be with my son's mother anymore, or she didn't want to be with me, whichever way. We had decided it was time to split. And it didn't take long after that, I met somebody in rehab the first time I'd ever went who actually lived where my mother had lived in Michigan. And I spent a lot of time with her, and she had reintroduced me into heroin again. And that's when the biggest part of my addiction really kicked off. The rest was all like an introductory period. And I found myself in rehab again very, very quickly. Within another year of being in that other treatment center and hurting my hand. The hand just opened the door for, I was in pain, so it opened the door to that really easy, really quickly for me. And in the second rehab, I didn't make it more than 3 days. I went outside whenever I was still in detox, and I remember there was this huge hill, and on the top of that hill was a basketball court, and I wanted to try to shoot some hoops, so I went and did that, and the ball had been airballed by this old man, and it just starts rolling down the hills, and at the bottom of this hill is the lake. So I decided I need to run after that ball and stop it from going into the lake. And this hill is so steep, by the time I get to the bottom of it, I realize I have to jump. There's a drop off about 3 foot down, and I had to jump. And when I jumped, I landed and I broke both my heels in a rehab. And at this point in time, I was on Suboxone, so as far as pain medication, it didn't exist for me. It wouldn't have worked. And so I sat in that hospital following that for 3 days with no pain medications with 2 broken heels. And I just knew, like, this is going to turn into something terrible for me. And it did. I was in a wheelchair for a year. And I did the craziest things, the craziest part of my addiction during time in the wheelchair. I remember I had these air boots on, and I would push the button and air them up. And I would go and get in the car with this girl I was seeing at the time, and I would drive an hour away in a set of, casts, essentially. I had no business driving a car. I would get to the spot, I would crawl out, I would go get my wheelchair out of the back and hop in, and I'd roll inside and I'd go get my dope from the dope man. And I did this the entirety of that year, and it was so bad that my mother would send my little sister in to do death checks on me and make sure I was alive. I lived with my family. I didn't communicate with my family. I was just a shell there for the longest time. I had no idea about God or about being saved, about anything other than go and get my next high. And once my feet got a little bit better, I had transitioned into a walker and then to a cane. But I had not had a sober day for a very long time at this point. Up after I hurt my hand was the last time I was sober, and these instances were a year apart in the same month of September. So, and from there, I ended up keeping the same plug for the longest time. I had the same guy I got my drugs from, and he began to allow me to sell drugs for him. So I sold heroin and crack cocaine and whatever, anything he needed me to sell for him at that point, just to pay for my own drugs. And this all occurred in the Ann Arbor area of Michigan. And eventually, while I'm out here selling drugs for him, I begin to see a pattern in one of these clients that he has, and I could tell in my heart that she was going to rat us out, and she did. She ratted him out to the DEA, and I had given him some things I should not have given him, like firearms and things of that nature. So I was really scared when he went to jail. I knew that there would be some trouble coming for me, and out of fear, I went to a treatment center in Florida just to get away from it. While I was there, the federal police, the state police, the DEA, all three of them had conducted their investigation. They had found that handgun that I had given that man. And they came looking for me, and they didn't find me. And my parents had called me, and they said, look, they are looking for you. They're asking about you. So I'm sitting here thinking, I'm going to prison. That's what's going to happen. They're going to come get me. I'm going to go to prison. And they did not. I spent 21 days in a detox center in West Palm Beach, which was a pretty long time to be in a detox. And for my third time, it was beginning to be more of a routine scenario for me. And I had intentions of doing the same thing I'd always done before. I didn't plan on getting sober. I was just reacting out of fear, for self-preservation purposes. And then I made it into the PHP section, which was an entirely different treatment center. And I met somebody there. I met this girl there who I liked a lot. And I've done this before. I had a little fling in rehab, and I didn't know what would come of it. But I do remember an instance where they had this uncovered backyard that was shared. It was like a community yard between 4 different properties. And they had a girl property, a boy property, so on and so on. So we all shared communal livings in the backyard. And I just remember dropping to my knees one day. The weight was so heavy for me. And I started talking to God. And talking to God was not something I did for a long time. And I felt moved, greater than I've ever felt moved before. I decided right here, right now, God, I'm going to surrender this to you. God, I mean it this time. God, I know I've knocked on the door a lot, just for self-preservation purposes, but today I want to live. I want to do things differently. And from that day forward, that was my moment. That was my come to God moment. That was my get sober moment. I met my wife in that treatment center. We've been married almost a year now. We've been together for coming on about 5 years. From there, we had transferred to an outpatient living. We had stayed in treatment for about 9 months. It's the longest I'd ever done treatment before. And things were just working. They were working. You could tell that I had put forth efforts I'd never put forth before, and they were paying off. We had rented an apartment from this Haitian couple, and we had no idea what that was going to look like. We thought that we were going to live there with one roommate. Turns out that they lived there as well. They just withheld that information from us. And it was, it wasn't great living, but it provided what we needed at the time. And we were able to save some money up. We worked really hard at the jobs that we had. And we said we were going to move back to Ohio where her child lived. And my son lived in Indiana, so it just worked out perfectly for us. It was a good location for us to be at, close to all of our kids. And somebody had given us a chance on an apartment that we weren't worthy of. We come from a long line of records and drug abuse, and we've been arrested, so we weren't expecting anybody to take us in, since they run record checks on everything you rent now. And this couple here in the community. Their name is Dan and Pam Jordan, and Dan was the pastor at our church here at Xenia Grace. And we had no idea what that would mean for us. And I know that I wanted to be closer to God at this point. I know God had saved me, but I didn't know all the steps I would need to take to become a Christian, to set myself free. And my wife didn't either. But after moving in, we soon found that our neighbor would become a great friend of ours, and he was also, the same story. He was a drug addict. He lived a long life of hardships, and he was set free. They kept trying to get us to go to church with them, and we were pretty resistant, really resistant at first. We didn't talk to the pastor too much. We still made some mistakes here and there. A couple run-ins with alcohol, things like that, but we'd abstained from doing drugs still. We had a baby that we weren't ready to have. I had a little girl. She's a beautiful little girl, and we had no idea what we were doing. We'd had kids before, but we were drug addicts, and we wanted to give this the proper shot and raise a child the right way. And months come to pass, and finally our neighbor talks us into going to church with him and his wife. And from that day forward, we've never looked back. We've been set free. Our pastor ended up becoming a good friend of ours. Our neighbors were a good friend of ours. They owned these 3 apartment buildings. And our good friend was in one of them. We were in the other. And now another good friend that works in this ministry with my wife lives in that apartment building as well. This apartment building ended up being a saving grace for so many of us. It did. And now we're almost 5 years in, completely free and abstinent from drugs and alcohol. We have a beautiful life. We have beautiful children. We have a relationship with every one of these children. We go to Bible study every week. We go to church every week. My wife works in ministry. And we're doing everything we can to walk in line with God. And it's become a beautiful life for us. It really has.